Okay, here we are, UFC 287. Alex Pereira versus Israel Adesanya 2/4, as well as Gilbert Burns versus Jorge Masvidal in the co-main, as well as Rob Font and Adrian Yanez, with Kevin Holland and Santiago Ponzinibbio also competing on this card, with Raul Rosa also competing. And a fairly interesting card on the featured prelims. You got Chris Curtis and Calvin Gastelum, and on the early prelims we got the likes of Cynthia Calvillo fight. And yeah, pretty interesting card, obviously out here in Miami. I think it's the main event's been obviously hyped up and been on the radar for a long time, but I think the co-main is a very interesting fight for this UFC welterweight division that is taking shape now quite nicely, with Leon Edwards now the champ, with the possibility of Colby fighting for the belt. But I do think this co-main, regardless of what Dana White says, if one of these two can make a statement, especially if it's Masvidal, I think there definitely could be a potential title fight on the horizon for these. Even the fights like Kevin Holland and Ponzinibbio, even though there is some doubt whether Ponzinibbio is going to fight, with Kevin Holland posting some stuff on social media. But regardless, a very entertaining and interesting card. What I'm going to do is, as always, I preview the fights that are the more anticipated. So I will go through the co-main and main. But if I go through some of the other fights, so first you got Raul Rosas Jr. and Christian Rodriguez. Obviously, with Rosas being so young, they're going to give him some lackluster opponents. However, Christian Rodriguez 8-1, so not a bad record. And 18 years old, Rosa versus 25 for Rodriguez. Slightly taller Rosa. Rodriguez has a pretty significant reach advantage. Not seen much of him, I'll be honest. But with Raul Rosa, I think because he is so young, they're not going to give him killers straight away. However, you keep going up the rankings and maybe you could see him eventually pop up with some high quality opponents. I think he'll get it done now. Like I said, I think at the age he's at, you don't want to give him somebody that's going to kill off his whole 20s when he's still only 18. So yeah, I think he gets that one done, Rosa. And then with Kevin Holland, Ponzinibbio, people forget, once upon a time was a real player in this welterweight division, but kind of fell off and hasn't really been able to really stake his claim in this division, hasn't been able to really build any kind of momentum. If you want to look, obviously, his last fight, Ponzinibbio, was his win against Alex Morono. Before that, getting beat by Michel Pereira, and then before that, losing Jeff Neal, getting the win over Miguel Baeza, but then getting KO'd by Li Jingliang in round 1. So not been the greatest for him, but I do think against Kevin Holland, he could have had a grappling advantage. But if this fight does go ahead, which we're unsure at the moment, I'll say Kevin Holland gets it done on the feet. I think he'll just get a 5-round. I don't think he'll be, a 3-round decision. I don't think he'll be a knockout for Kevin Holland. Kevin Holland traditionally isn't really a knockout artist, and I think at welterweight he's skilled. He's still quite strong, but I feel like at middleweight, naturally more weight, more power, and I think at welterweight, I don't think he has quite the same advantages in terms of being more powerful than most of these guys on the feet. But he's longer, and I think he's definitely one of my favourite fighters to watch. Kevin Holland, one of my favourite personalities and one of my favourite fighters stylistically. If you stand and bang with him, he's a problem for quite a few people, but obviously, as we know, it's the grappling where he's always fell short, but I still think he'll have enough to get this one done. And then going on to Rob Font and Adrian Yanez. Rob Font in his last fight got an absolutely brutal loss to Chito Vera, where his face was all kinds of mangled. Horrible fight to watch from that point of view, but I think he's definitely still someone to watch out for. 35, so he's oldish, but I still think he's there in this bantamweight division. And yeah, I think he gets to. Adrian Yanez not a bad fighter. I think he's somebody who definitely, again, 29, so very not young, but in the prime of his career. And I think I won't admit to be watching a lot of Uni's, but I do think if you look at the way Rob Font fights with that jab of his, it's one of the best jabs I think in the whole of mixed martial arts, and barely got a reach of adrenaline, but I feel like he'll have enough to get this one done. Then I think I can still see him being a player in this division. I just don't know whether he's good enough to beat the likes of a Yan or O'Malley or people, or Aljamain, or people on that level. But we'll see. An interesting fight nonetheless. But as I mentioned, the co-main and the main event are my two main ones that I'm going to preview, starting off with Gilbert Burns and Jorge Masvidal in the welterweight division. Miami, so it's obviously Masvidal's home territory, but certainly not an easy fight for either of these guys. Masvidal 38 now, so only 2 years at 40. Don't realize how old he actually is until I actually started looking up. Burns 36, so not young either, but I think maybe slightly more in a tank. Neither of these two have really took that much damage. They both have been stopped and knocked out by Kamaru Usman, but long term, it's not like they always are in wars. Burns had that one against Chimaev, but again, I think the Usman and Chimaev fight are the only real ones I look at for him at welterweight recently, where have been a bit rough for him. Obviously, those are the two that he lost, but I still feel like he hasn't really been through much more. Obviously, got knocked out by Dan Hooker when he was at lightweight, but against the weight cut. But I feel like Burns' chin is a bit suspect, but recently he still looks like he's still on top and still fresh as ever. And with Masvidal, little to in his last few, obviously, his last few fights, or 3 fights, he lost to Usman, 2 to Usman and 1 to Colby. Against Colby, he got wore out. Looked like he was going to have an asthma attack at one point. He was so tired in there. And bit of damage here and there, but nothing on the feet really. And with Usman, obviously, we know first fight he was wore out and a little cut, but nothing major. But then we all know what happened in the second fight when he got put out cold. So it's one of those, I don't know really, for Masvidal. I think his chin, I'd imagine, would still be okay against Colby. Colby doesn't hit hard, nowhere near as hard as Usman, so I don't think there was really much to go off. But Burns does hit hard, and I think he hits harder than Colby. So I would be interested to see how he looks in that department. But an intriguing fight. The obvious thing you would go for is that Burns' jiu-jitsu should be enough to keep Masvidal down, and Masvidal, we all know, struggles. But you know, Burns isn't the same sort of chain wrestler like Colby, and he also hasn't got the pressure of Usman when he takes you down. So he's someone who keeps you down, and he did it against Wonderboy, but I think Wonderboy's grappling, in my opinion, isn't as good as Masvidal's. And Masvidal's grappling is not fantastic, but I think it's better than what people do give it credit for. It's just when you go up against specialist wrestlers, it's hard. Again, with Burns, he's been knocked out twice in his career, so recently. So there is a possibility of Masvidal catching him with something on the feet, and Masvidal, say what you want about him, but people definitely do respect his striking enough to not completely go all out against him. And I think it's a testament to, I think, how dangerous that this guy still is, even with losing a few, and even with having his record, which is a bit up and down. But yeah, an intriguing fight nonetheless. Personally, I think the key for Burns would be to close the distance. I think step in with the striking and just get Masvidal fearing the takedown, and I think eventually your striking will open up for Masvidal. I think with Burns being so heavy on the lead leg, I think using the calf kick would be important. And Burns, because he's so like hunched over almost, he gets dropped easily by jabs. And I think that definitely would be something to look at. I think attack the lead leg and go for and try and attack the jab, I think would be important, because I think with Burns, the more he gets stung with that jab, I think with Usman, when he started stinging him with a jab, you see Burns he's tried to parry at little points and try to almost escape it, but then once Usman put the right hand behind it, that's where you see he got wobbled. And I think Burns could have that problem against Masvidal. The only thing is, can Masvidal keep it on the feet long enough for him to land it? I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. I think I could see Masvidal trying for a kick and Burns catching it and taking him down. And then I can just see Burns eventually finding his way to either a rear naked choke or a triangle or something along them lines, or an arm triangle perhaps. Yeah, I personally think that on my prediction, I like Masvidal's chances. I think he could, if he can just keep it up, could damage Burns. I could see him knocking him out, but I think it's a long shot personally. So I'm going to say I think Masvidal, as good as he is, I think Burns will get the submission in round 2. I think Masvidal will do well. I think he'll light him up on the feet at points. He'll might hurt or wobble him, but I think Burns will weather the storm and eventually get Masvidal down and get the submission. And then I'd like to see him and Colby next, or him and Bilal would be a good fight next, personally. We all know Colby's probably going to fight for the belt, but a man can dream. I'd like to see Colby at least fight at least one contender in his time. So yeah, this would be that definitely would be the fight to make. If not, him Bilal would be a good fight. But yeah, there's a few good fights out there for him. I think isn't Shavkat supposed to be scheduled to fight Bilal? There's again a lot of fights out there for Burns. I think with Usman now not the champion, you could definitely have him and Edwards down the line. But either way, intriguing fight. But I think Burns gets the finish. And then going on to the main event, Alex Pereira and Israel Adesanya 2/4. As we know, this is the 4th time they've met in general. 2nd time in the mixed martial arts settings. Fought twice in kickboxing before, with Pereira winning a decision, even though Adesanya probably should have won, and then getting the knockout in the second fight. And then in their last fight where they fought each other, obviously Pereira got the TKO in the 5th round. Perfectly fine stoppage, even though there is still that debate of whether it should have been stopped. For Adesanya's sake, I think he should fat Mark Goddard, because I think he would have been put out cold if I think they allowed it to continue. So I think it's smart for Israel Adesanya's health there. An intriguing fight, this one. So first thing to note, so watching that first fight back, that first fight was a lot more competitive than what people actually do give credit for. The narrative with Adesanya and Pereira, similar with Usman and Edwards, was the champion in this case was Adesanya. Did everything right. He just got sloppy at the end. He just needs to not do that and he wins the fight. He almost hurt him and knocked him out in the first. But if you know martial arts, you know this is a lot more complicated than that. You're fighting a guy in Pereira who was essentially, the reason he was losing that fight was the grappling, and the reason he was able to get Adesanya was to take him down was because Pereira made the mistake of almost trying to take Adesanya down mid-transition, and because of that, Adesanya was able to get the body lock and got him down, and then was able just to keep him there for the remainder of the round. And then 4th round comes, and Adesanya kind of just picks at him, doesn't really do much, but does enough, and volume is ahead because Pereira's tired from the 3rd round. But the 1st round was close, and I had Pereira winning it up until the point where Adesanya wobbles in, which gives Adesanya the round. And the 2nd round, I think, was Pereira's quite comfortably, to be honest. So it's an intriguing one, and Pereira showed in that fight that his power, which is monstrous, does not go away after 1 or 2. It is there for the whole fight, even when he's tired. So that's something to really watch out for. We see a lot of guys, their power wanes after a bit, but with Pereira, it's not the case. I think because the way he's built, he's massive for the weight. Wouldn't be shocked regardless of the result if this is his last fight at middleweight, but I do think his body type, he's not that overly muscular. He's just very, very big for the weight. I think because of that, that's why his power is able to go through the whole 5. But looking at this fight, I do think so. I think Adesanya's smart enough to know that it wasn't as if he just has to do the same thing again. There are little adjustments he has to make. He did something which worried me every single time, and that was naturally backing up against the fence. And I think, should he make that mistake again, this time I think he could pull out quicker. He did this in kickboxing, which made me worry a little bit for his fight, because when I look at it, in kickboxing you can go back against the ropes and sort of use it to your advantage. You can't do that in mixed martial arts. You are bang straight up against the cage, which is going to provide like a hard surface, so you can't move anywhere, you can't maneuver, you can't use the ropes to your advantage. And this is where he did struggle, and this is where a few times Pereira came close to landing those shots in the first fight. And I do think in this one, should Adesanya do that again, I think this time you'll see Pereira, if he does it again, possibly land a shot that'll put him out cold rather than just wobbling, because I just don't know if Adesanya, and this is the problem, I don't know if Adesanya can fight any other way. Naturally, he's a counter striker, he backs up, and he can be aggressive, but it's still naturally, you can implement tactics as much as you want, but when your natural inclination is to fight off the back foot, it's always going to be there. And against a guy like Pereira, who is as dangerous, you're also naturally going to back up against a guy like that. You're not going to engage him. So that's one thing to worry about. Second thing for Adesanya, which I do worry about, is I do think he can fight that, probably could fight that against a guy like Pereira, that grapple heavy first approach for 5 rounds. But you got one, Pereira has Glover in his corner, who is a fantastic grappler, whereas Adesanya doesn't really have access, I feel, to that level of grapplers. He trains very much with his own team at City Kickboxing. I think he has other Australian wrestlers coming, but I feel like you need more, is the point. And I don't know if he's got good guys in his camp. I mean, we saw how much Volkanovski wrestling, how good his was against Makhachev, but Volkanovski was I think he was a state champion for Australia for wrestling, something like that. So he did very good in that. Volkanovski already had a solid grappling base, whereas Adesanya doesn't have that. He's a kickboxer, and I think against a guy like Pereira, who would also worked on your grappling, and for a guy who, let's not get twisted, it wasn't like Adesanya was picking Pereira apart on the feet. It was a very, very close fight on the feet, and you could always felt the whole 5 that at any point Pereira could land something and put him out cold. He's done it once in kickboxing, and the fact that he did it again in mixed martial arts shows that this guy, no matter what, is always going to be dangerous. So that is my second thing. I just don't know if the grappling, if he can do that for the whole 5, mixed in with his normal style. I think he'll always want to fight the way he fights, and it's just a horrible matchup for him in that sense. And then the third point, and this is my big point, which I am very interested in. What is Israel Adesanya's mindset going to be like? Because, right, we go through every single one of his fights with Pereira. First fight, he felt he should have won the first kickboxing fight, and he should have, if I'd be honest. I think the decision was incorrect. Second fight, you go into that second fight, you probably think, I should have won, but this time I'll be more aggressive and I'll make it conclusive so the judges have to give it to me. And he did that. He hurt him, wobbled him in those kickboxing fights. And Pereira ends up knocking him out in the last round. So, we then go into the mixed martial arts fight. You're thinking, okay, he knocked me out, but that was a long time ago. I hurt him in the fight. He kept saying it, did you watch those fights, to everybody who talked about it, claiming that he was ahead in the fight. He felt like he was doing good. It was just that Pereira not got lucky, but just landed that one shot that got him. But he was dominating the whole fights. And his mind, and everybody else's mind, that was a long time ago. He's a better fighter now. This is his setting, mixed martial arts. That won't happen again. And it happened again. He got finished in the last round the exact same, not exact same way, but in the exact sort of same circumstances, where he also hit Pereira in that sense. One thing I would say, Adesanya is a confident guy. You lose one time to a guy, you can let it go. Second time, third time, I think there's serious doubts in his head, and I do worry a little bit if he does lose this fight, because for Israel Adesanya, I feel Alex Pereira presents an obstacle in his life where I just feel like no matter what, I think he may feel he won't ever get over that. It's a little bit like the test that you could study as hard as you want. You do everything correct. You revise the night before. You do everything that you were supposed to. You did everything right. And you still failed. And I feel like with Israel Adesanya, I think the way he lost those 3 fights is actually worse for his mental well-being than if he had just got knocked out first round in all of those fights, or if he had maybe got dominated for all the fight. Because you get knocked out in the first round, all those fights, you just think, okay, I just got to do this again, or do that differently. You get dominated, you just think, okay, I got to change my approach, maybe I don't fight as aggressive or don't fight as on the back foot. He did damn near everything perfect in all 3 of those fights, and he lost all 3 of them. That, I don't care how confident you can be, messes with your head massively. I don't personally see, for Israel Adesanya, as amazing as he is, I do think that is on his mind a lot. And I just think that it, as great as he is, and if he wins the fight, I won't be shocked. I just don't know. Everybody has that boogeyman in their life as a fighter. You know, everybody had that one guy which was just horrible for them. The type of guy Pereira is, I just feel like he is that guy for him. I feel, again, he did hurt him, and maybe if you look at it, maybe he does the same thing again, but this time he stops him. It's possible, but again, just the type of guy Pereira is. Adesanya is a natural knockout artist anyway. He's somebody who kind of picks his shots at the right moment, at the right time. But Pereira is that, and yeah, Powhatan is just a horrible fight for him. He's just as long as Adesanya. He's got the kickboxing resume as well as Adesanya. He's a bigger man than Adesanya. There isn't much. I look at Adesanya. How much do you give him physically in this fight? Maybe you can say he's a better striker, which even then it's debatable, because Adesanya's whole sort of calling card is those leg kicks, and he checked majority of the Pereira, and that's why Adesanya's leg was dead when it came to the later rounds. I know he talks about wanting to settle scores, and he's going to end it now and what have you, and he's very much into anime. I'm sure he sees this as like a character arc, but I just think in his mind, I think he will know there is a pressure on him in this fight, which is horrible. And I do worry if he doesn't win this fight, because mentally, it's almost like you can never overcome that one obstacle. And I would like for him to win because of that, because it would show he can overcome it. But I don't know. I feel like this is a horrible fight for him, and because of that, I do think Pereira. I said last time I felt like he would get it done in the second to first round. I think this time he'll get it done, I think, within the first 3. I won't say first or second, but I do think he'll get it done before the 5th this time. I don't really see him fight Adesanya. You could grapple, but he's not. I don't think there's much of a difference in levels between them and grappling. He's better grappler Adesanya because of his experience, but not because of his ability to grapple, if that makes sense. Against Blachowicz, he did a lot of things that were very amateurish, and I think in this fight, I don't know if he can really do that for the whole fight, which is the problem with him. On the feet, he has to be perfect for all 5 rounds, and he showed, as amazing as he is, I just don't think he can be. Like I said, last fight, I picked Pereira because I looked at his size. He's just as big as Adesanya. He's powerful, can knock you out. And he also, obviously, has the kickboxing resume, which none of those guys did. Brunson didn't, but Vittori, Cannonier, Costa, Whitaker, they didn't have that. They also didn't have the size that Pereira has. So, yeah, there's a lot of problems in this fight for Adesanya. And I do wonder, again, he could change his approach, but it's just the problem that you've got is I just don't know what he could do different. This isn't like a Usman Edwards where, even though I disagree with the sentiment, a lot of people kind of felt that that Usman would just, all he has to do is grapple for all 5 rounds and he's alright against Edwards. Reason being because he was able to do that in the first or second fight even, and it worked very, very well for him. Edwards couldn't stop him. Now obviously we all know because of the cardio issues that Edwards had with it being in Utah and the elevation, but that was a narrative going into it, and obviously Edwards showed that that was the grappling wasn't really that much of a problem for him in that fight because he learnt from it. And that's one thing I think Pereira may do. I think he'll learn from some of the things. I don't think he'll get caught the way he got caught in their first official martial arts fight. I think he'll be smarter. I think he won't hang in the pocket as much, and I think the jab works very well for Pereira. And I think he'll be more confident in this one. So yeah, I can just see him. I'm gonna go for like a flying knee type knockout. I can see Adesanya almost fearing the left hook and almost putting his arm out, and then Pereira just driving the knee up the middle and knocking him out cold. But again, Adesanya's a great, but I just think this is just the one fight away, and the one fight away. I just think it's a horrible stylistic matchup for him, but we'll see. An interesting fight and an interesting card for this weekend for UFC 287. We'll do a review afterwards of the main event, and if anything interesting happens, I definitely will speak about it. And yeah, until next time.